You know what I mean? I tried.
I'm not saying he owns it.
Oh, no.
I'm not sure. There's some big, huge ones. That's really your structure. That's something I've ever done until
Right, that might work. No, because they're close to lanes. Oh, no. Yes.
Good, how are you? I'll reach out to you, but like in the new year, once I know for sure, like about when you're gonna present all the stuff on ETV.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate that. Oh my god, my coat smells. I'm just checking the audio now. You're fine.
You're so
I stayed off yesterday with my grandchildren, so that, you know, because it's voting day. And oh, yeah. So I'm going by email. Yes, that's exactly right. I always feel like I'm running behind, no matter what I do. Do you know Mindy? Mindy is our insurance program. Nancy Bistry is in funding. I don't know exactly what you do now, but she kind of coordinates everything.
general manager.
Oh, that's well, that's exactly what she does. I knew you knew both sides of what happened. So yeah, I know you're not filming, but it's good to know people in the county. Yeah, because Mindy's coming up. She's been around for a long time, not just with us and the other agencies, but it's good for her to know you guys.
Sure. Awesome. Good. Good to meet you. And hopefully I'll
Nancy's someone you don't want Nancy to retire.
Gotcha.
Well, I don't know. Whatever we pay for, we have to have a specific electrical, a specific wiring, a specific fire to turn in with our application. So that's why all those things we
okay.
call would be really great.
So I didn't get a response, so I went ahead and moved forward with the electrical and the furnace. I'm still waiting to hear back from the fire department about what days they have available, but I have 2 days open for Thursday, tomorrow from 2 to 5 for both Nelson Heating and Cooper Electric to come, or Monday.
Okay. So she's supposed
Monday at
she
10:30.
may be here. I don't see her yet. But if she's not, she's supposed to be at her place at 1. If she's not, we'll have to call her and probably, and we'll find out.
Okay, so I have
If
both
she's
of
not
those
there,
persons.
then that's when we're supposed to fill out that application. So
That okay, gotcha. I did not know that, so that
yeah,
makes
oh,
sense.
that's okay.
Okay, so the only thing I have to get a hold of is the fire department. I have yet to get a hold of them, so because I got to figure out which fire department goes for that place. And that application turn in goes to the county, or where does that
It'll
application
go to the state of Ohio. We have to have a letter of support from the county, and she didn't want me to write that she wanted to do it. So I have to wait and see what she has done.
Who would write that? From the county.
The superintendent of Dallas.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, just so you all know, I know we're not starting quite yet, but we've got the microphone on, so the conversations are live, just so you know, okay? Especially you guys up front. Thank you. Technology, you know.
You know. Maybe.
I brought my computer. Thanks for doing those guys. That's really good. I'm sure much appreciated.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Provider Forum. I am Karen Sherman, and I manage our Quality and Performance Department, and I'm going to share a few things. We are still waiting on a few presenters, so we'll skip around the agenda just a little bit. The first thing I want to share about EDV is there's been a delay, so that will not go into effect till August 5th, with training not beginning in January anymore. Training will begin in April. So just keep in mind, before August 5th, all direct support staff need to be trained on EDV and devices need to be requested. And this is for individuals that have homemaker personal care and bill 15-minute units at this point. All right, so a little bit of good news there, a little bit of delay to continue to plan. I know we have several providers that are looking at different systems to use to merge documentation, timesheets, so hopefully we get some more information to share with the group shortly. The other thing I wanted to discuss is inducements. So the federal guidelines on inducements is that for individuals that receive Medicaid services, they cannot receive gifts from their provider that exceed $10 per item and $50 annually. So I thought it was important that we share this a little bit, especially with the holidays coming up. We know that individuals live on a fixed income, and a lot of time providers really do go above and beyond to make sure that individuals have a really spectacular holiday. So that guideline is concerning based on that. I had a conversation with an adult shared living provider. So they have individuals living in their home, and they also have family members that live in their home. So they were really concerned about how the individual would be impacted on Christmas Day if their gift was limited to a $10 item like a scarf, while everyone else in the household got some more lavish gifts. And so I talked to legal yesterday about that a little bit, and she basically said it is what it is. It's the federal guideline. It's not something that we're going to go out and say, give me proof that you didn't give somebody gifts. I mean, but it is the federal guideline that we have to follow. We also know that some agencies, larger agencies especially, may have like parent groups that get donations or sponsorship. That is permitted. Also with adult shared living, it came up that the individual may go to a relative's house to celebrate the holidays too, like extended families. They're able to accept gifts from the extended family, just not the provider that's accepting Medicaid. So when we really start to get concerned about inducements, she gave an example as an individual was unhappy with their provider, and they made some sort of comments like, oh, I think I'm going to start looking for a new provider, or the provider somehow learned that the individual was going to start looking for a new provider. And then all of a sudden the SSA comes to the house and is like, oh my goodness, you have a 40-inch TV in your bedroom. And they're like, is that a new TV? And the individual's like, yes. Where did you get it? My provider. So that's the thing, that's the type of activity that we are really concerned about. All right? Any questions? Yeah.
So like parent group money, gifts, is there a dollar amount on that? Because that's a separate fundage, right?
Correct. They're not getting any Medicaid funds for that service. And all right. Thank you.
We're off our schedule a little bit. Keith, are you ready for the call?
Okay, sure.
Leave on my list.
Yeah, it's my phone.
Oh, I guess my phone. Oh, for that.
Oh, I pulled off my old list that they emailed us, and there's a new list.
You're screaming now.
Yeah, everybody. Keith was named on my list.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, so I think it's not a while ago.
I just wanted to, I got just 5 seconds really, just some upcoming opportunities for trainings that we're sponsoring as a community of practice here around day program, employment. Oh, sure. Oh, no.
We're all getting used to this. But
So it's right there. Okay. It's like Hal the computer. I'm going to. I'm sorry, Keith. Basically on November the 26th in Butler County at the Ohio Means Jobs in Fairfield, Colleen Mercury is going to do a kind of a training around trauma-informed care for community-based providers around day program, even HPC folks that are trying to integrate and help people get into the world. It's it's the primer, it's the beginning of hopefully a conversation that we'll start sponsoring trauma-informed care kind of trainings as needed for where we can go. So that's November the 26th. And I guess, can I send it to you to send out?
Absolutely.
Thank you. We have like 3 slots left though. Again, it's the beginning of a conversation. December 7th is a webinar we're doing, and it's 10 to noon. And again, the registration will come out, and it's got lots of room because it's a webinar. And it actually came out of one of these provider forums a couple months ago, maybe back this summer, where we were talking about career discovery and really how to do that waiver service through the career planning. And basically, like 4 providers, 3 county boards, a couple of OOD counselors are all going to be in a roundtable kind of situation discussing how to do career discovery from referral through authorization, through doing the service, doing the career profile doc, and then how to use the information to create outcomes around employment. So basically, I won't be talking at that one. It'll be practitioners that'll be talking about how they actually do it. And so you're welcome to join that. And there's a couple of trainings next year that we're working on that I thought if you guys want to email me or call me or whatever, you're welcome to help me figure out. One is around helping residential providers when people get jobs, and the difference between that kind of a service and a day program kind of service, and the expectations that are different, all that kind of stuff. And that we're shooting for maybe February, March for that one. And there was one more. Oh yes, Technology First. Have you all heard about that one? We're going to do a training with Kyle Corbin, who runs Technology First, around employment services and employment first and technology first, and where they intersect, like remote supports around job coaching, assistive technology for people who are working in the community, et cetera. Also vocational training through apps and other kind of technology to support that. So that's coming next, I think maybe March on that one, because assistive tech used to be under the career planning, it still is, but in January it's going to just be its own animal, assistive tech. And so we'll talk through some actual people that are already in organizations that are already kind of figuring out employment supports and technical supports at the same time. There's a place called Med for All. I don't know if you've heard of them, that are really doing some innovative kind of engineering around apps and basically asking providers and people what they need, and then designing assistive tech and other supports, technological supports that way. So I think that's all I got. Please, if you're interested in any of this information, email me or call me, and I'd be interested in talking to y'all. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
So, yeah, that's fine.
Morning, everyone. All right, I gotta make sure I'm in the right place so Dawn doesn't move me around. Okay. First, I have a question. Can I see a show of hands? How many provide residential services with shared settings? People share services. A few of you. Okay. So what I'm going to cover today is just kind of a glimpse of. Oh, what? A glimpse of what's coming next year. And also, if I look like I'm giving you a dirty look, I'm not. I'm having an issue with my contact, so I promise I'm not giving dirty looks. I can't see. So the first thing I want to talk about is a new flat rate billing system that's coming, and it's only going to apply to residential shared settings. So anybody who currently uses the DRA right now, in the future it's going to be called the monthly rate calculator. Where's Nancy? Yell if I get something wrong, Nancy. Monthly rate calculator. Couple things about this, and I'm not going to go into great detail. We will probably be scheduling some trainings once we know enough to actually train you early next year. But here's what I can tell you. The good news on this is it's supposed to be a simplification for everyone. I think it probably will be. I will say in our county, I think it's going to be less of a time saver than maybe in other counties where they piddle back and forth about Johnny got home at 8:02 versus 8:04 and they want a revision. We don't do that kind of stuff here a lot, so I think for us it'll be a little less of a time saver, but hopefully it'll be a good thing overall. The really positive thing I want to point out is how it's being implemented. This is the first time I've seen this. The state is going to allow the county to control the implementation of this. So it'll be available to us starting in January, but it'll be a rolling implementation over the course of all of 2019. So basically, we will be coming up with a calendar of when we will switch agency by agency over into the new system. So when we turn an agency on, we will flip all sites at the same time. And Nancy and I have already started some preliminary talks about where to start with that. We have a couple of you we're going to be reaching out to, asking if you'll be our first ones to kind of pilot this with us, because we'll learn a lot in those first switchovers, we imagine. If you're interested in going early, please let us know. Reach out to Nancy, Nancy Bistry. If you don't have her email, I'll have Dawn send it out when you send the stuff out. We'll do our best to accommodate if you request to go later or earlier. If everybody wants to go at the same time, that won't work, but our plan is to roll everybody over the course of the year. A few other things I can tell you about it. Basically, it'll still live within CPT. We'll go in the same way we do now and enter all the services the person needs. We'll have a team conversation about what's needed, plug in all the services in the calendars, and then it'll basically come up with a monthly rate that your agency will get to serve the person. And then we essentially will not make any revisions unless you go outside of a certain window. Did we land on, is it 5%? It ended up at 3, okay. So unless something occurs that causes the cost to go outside of that, above or below 3% of the cost that we came up with, we won't make a revision. Okay? We will make a revision always for things like move in, move out, things like that. But if somebody leaves for a day and it doesn't affect your overall, doesn't go more than outside that 3%, there will be no revision. We won't change it. So there's some risk of liability on both the provider and on the county board, but it should be minimal based on that 3%. And they use a lot of data, and I mean a lot of data, about sites and site costs to come up with these ranges to try to make the least impact and the least risk, both the provider and county board. So there was county boards on that. I actually sat on that work group. There was many providers on there, as well as state representatives. So I think this system will be pretty good. I don't think it'll be a ton of change for us, other than you can bill by the month, but you can still bill weekly or bi-weekly if you wish. Bi-weekly still, weekly too, right? Yeah. The total rate you get will be the same for that person, but if you don't want to wait and only bill by the month, if that's going to impact your cash flow, understandably, you still will have the ability to bill in those smaller time frames. Initially, when they talked about this, it was going to be you must bill monthly, and that was a big problem for providers. So they were able to create a system where the fee, the cost is by the month, but you can still bill it weekly or bi-weekly. We have only seen screenshots and heard about it. We haven't been able to go in live and look at it. So hopefully we get a better look and a little more information. Then we'll start putting together some training schedule. I'm afraid to schedule it yet because I have nothing to show you. Nancy, anything else about the flat rate?
There's also some time frames on when you have to request a revision.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. That will cause us to change our existing procedure related to revision requests. There are certain time frames you have to report things to us. The major risk, I think, that we could run into as far as problems is when we don't know about things that happen, particularly move-out situations, and people billing and then needing to make a revision is going to be a problem. So we'll put together, once we have all the, have the rule, and actually the rule's out there right now if you want to go look at it. It's out in rules to be implemented. It's at the bottom of the department's list. Anything else I'm forgetting? It'll be critically important, though. There cannot be any moves in shared settings without us knowing about it ahead of time. That will be a huge problem. It's a problem now, but it'll become even more of a problem in the future. And that does happen, where providers bill, we don't know they've moved, and that's a real problem. Did you have a question that I probably don't have an answer to?
Yeah, you may not know, or you may already. Hospitalizations that go on for extended periods and then maybe someone goes to rehab, does that fall under the move in, move out, or does that fall under, you can't do it unless it hits at 3%?
That'll be a move in, move out situation depending on how long they're gone.
Okay.
If you couldn't hear the question, it was if someone goes to the hospital, particularly those longer stays where they go hospital, rehab, those kinds of things. Any kind of move in, move out, I think, what is the minimum time? Do you remember? It's in the rule. I can't remember either. But the key on those, when you mentioned hospital, we now have the rules governing waiver services. If they're going to be in the hospital or nursing facility any more than a certain period of time, we have to disenroll the waiver, period. We used to have a lot of flexibility with that, and we have none now with Ohio benefits in place. So, but we'll make sure we talk a lot about that when we go to implement.
Okay, thanks.
But those are things we would definitely want to know about. So more to come on that. Once we have a calendar, we'll contact you. We'll kind of let you know when we're planning to transition you, and then if that's a problem for you for any reason, we'll work with you on that. But we're going to come up with kind of a preliminary calendar, what we think would work for us and hopefully for you, but we're flexible if you need us to change it. So we'll get that out as soon as we can get it together. Okay, a couple things. We have a couple new waiver services coming in January. I think I've mentioned a few before, but I wanted to get your attention on them, and if you could go out and read the rules, it'd probably be a good idea. The first is actually something Keith just mentioned, which is the new assistive technology service. That'll be coming out in January. All of these are a January effective date, and they've all gone through, so we should not have any delays. Assistive technology will replace a number of services and kind of expand what we're able to do now. Some of the things that Keith talked about, such as technology that might assist someone in being more independent in the community, things we really didn't have a place for before, will be able to be authorized under this service. So that's really good news. Of course, with new services comes new challenges and new learning, so we'll all just be patient with one another. But let me give you an idea of what's ending. So remote monitoring equipment will no longer be a separate service. It will actually be authorized under assistive technology. So the equipment component to that will go under this service. Likewise, anything we used to authorize as personal emergency response, we can still do those things, but they will now be known as assistive technology. The other thing which Keith mentioned earlier, currently there's a specific service in career planning called assistive technology and technology assessment. Those things would be under assistive technology, not under a career planning service in the future. The other thing that's important to know about this is that remote monitoring, you probably heard us talk about it as remote supports for a while now. That'll become official in January, so you'll see a name change with that service. I don't think they've tweaked anything else in that rule, although I probably need to read it to make sure. Those are the biggies under assistive technology. So we're looking forward to that. A lot to learn. I think there'll be some training around that. We'll be looking forward to going to those ourselves and learning more about some options there. The other new service I want to just mention is a new service under the IO waiver only. I think it's IO only, correct, Dave? Right? Yeah. Community transition is the name of the service. Just so you know what it is, it's replacing home choice. Okay? And we don't know a ton about it yet. We actually just got a little bit of information. As we get more and learn more, we'll get it back to you. Community transition. So the home choice program, mainly for people coming out of the DC or coming out of an ICF. Can you use it for nursing home? Coming out of nursing home too, yes? Helping with those transitions. We'll learn more about what that means and get you some more information, but I want to get it on your radar.
The assistive technology,
Uh-huh.
if you're already doing career planning or you're certified to do that, will you have to apply for this new service? Or will
I'm not sure on that. I was actually going to ask Karen if she could help me look into that. I'll repeat the question, sure. So the question was, if you're already certified for career planning, the assistive technology, would you have to reapply for this new assistive technology service? I'm not sure how certification is going to work on this rollout. Do you know? Does Keith know? Keith?
Career planning to the assistive tech, I'm going to double check, but when I was talking to Kyle, I think it's grandfathers.
Grandfathers.
Let me send a link to the info, to the rule too, just to.
Thank you. I also thought I heard that, and I also thought I heard if you're currently certified for a personal emergency response or the remote monitoring equipment, you would automatically get this certification, which kind of follows suit with what they've done in the past, so that would make sense. I would say if you have those certifications, even if they say they're going to grandfather you, you might want to check to make sure it rolls over
Always
correctly.
good, yes.
Always check. Great question. Oh, we don't know. Now, you know I'm not going to have an answer, Mark.
Right, well, or what the code's changing on we bill for the technology equipment itself, so it's going underneath that, that's being changed to.
I do believe the codes are changing. Nancy, did you look? Is there an appendix with codes? I didn't look. I would assume the billing code will change to this new billing code. And I don't know, in the past, when they've done away with a service mark and done a new one, the code has worked. So the old code had worked for a period of time, and then we just got to do the new code when we do a new plan year. I don't know for sure, but that is how they've done it in the past with a couple of services. I hope that's how they did this. Can you make a note for us to check on that, Nancy? We'll check on that, Mark, because I don't know. I haven't seen that yet. So does that make sense? In the past, when they've done away with a service and replaced it with a new one, the old billing code worked for a period of time, and it rolled up to the new one, and then we just authorized the new code in the new span year. Hopefully that's how this will work. But I don't know for sure. The other thing I just want to touch on and talk a little bit about, you've probably heard us talk about our emphasis on remote supports here in our county. We've been doing a lot with that. It was actually in our annual plan this year, and we've, I imagine, at least hit our goal, if not far surpassed it. We have a small group of staff, Allison Leedy and Molly Jamar have been leading that up, and many of you have been involved in their work. We've had provider partnerships with that. What we've been targeting this year, we've been targeting people who have on-site on-call, particularly those who live alone with on-site on-call, and trying to see if that person would be safe to use remote monitoring. We've transitioned quite a number of people and had quite a lot of success with that. In fact, right now, I don't know if I mentioned this last time, we are leading the state with the number of remote monitoring authorizations, so which is really good news. There's going to be more work on that. We're going to continue that as a new goal for next year. We'll be continuing that work. Also want to let you know that that group's been doing a lot of talking around the state, and Director Martin is going to be coming down here right toward the end of his tenure, actually. In December sometime, I think we're still waiting on dates. But he's going to come down here and visit 4, I think, of our sites where we have put remote monitoring in place and meeting the people. And there's going to be, the Cincinnati Enquirer is going to be doing a piece on it, taping here in Hamilton County, several sites. So pretty exciting stuff. They also, the team working on that applied for and was awarded a grant that we received, and you'll see that coming into place next year. But what the grant's going to be paying for is for us to build, for lack of a better word, a smart home in Warren. It'll be in Warren County. It's actually for all the COG counties. So Dawn, help me. That's Hamilton, Warren, Butler, Claremont, Greene, and Montgomery. Thank you. But it will be located at the Warren County offices. And what they're building, for, like I said, lack of a better term, is a smart home there in the office. So there'll be a number of different pieces of technology that you can use in remote supports and other assistive tech that you could bring individuals and families and providers can come and kind of look at them and demo there at the Warren County offices. So more information to come about when that'll open. It's a pretty exciting opportunity. And the other thing I want to tell you about that, if you're interested, of course, contact us if you'd like to team up with us and try to do some targeting of this in your agency or get into the business of doing more remote supports. But I wanted to mention, Karen asked me to point out on our provider page, on our internet page, the one for providers, they've added some resources under a link for remote supports related to this. So some informational stuff, and also some of the videos they've produced are there. And the videos are really nice, particularly if you have a situation with a family maybe that's a little resistant or afraid, or even a team that's not sure if this will work. There's several different examples of stories where we've done this and it's been a really successful thing. So look for that, and more to come on remote supports in 19. Karen, did I miss anything on that? Okay. So we're going to be doing a lot more with remote supports and assistive tech in 19. This will definitely be part of our agency goals. And if you haven't heard the agencies talk about this, I think they came here actually. But remember, remote supports is also a way to help deal with some of the challenges we're all having with staffing, because that when you can put remote supports in place and there's that backup provider there, you don't have to staff that home overnight. It's a win-win. If that person's able to do that safely, it's really a good thing for the provider, for the individuals, and it's a cost savings across the board as well, but helps you with your staffing issues.
It's helped us tremendously in Montgomery County, so I'll throw it out. I do have a question, since you're leading the state. Have you done any intervention with families as far as education, like forums with them? Our biggest trouble is introducing the topic to a family member and then just closing down and not wanting to go.
That is part of our goals for 19. So we've identified that is a challenge. Actually, in 18, we really learned, honestly, our own staff was a big challenge. So we held some focus groups to find out, people were just, it was out of a good place. People are very fearful. They want to make sure people are safe and that things are going to go well. So even our own staff was resistant. So we did some focus groups around that, kind of figured out what people's fears were, and then we've been developing, some of these videos are addressing exactly what we heard the fears are. So some of the videos may be helpful with families. But yeah, we're working on trying to come up with some strategies for families in 19 as well. Speaking of that, this was not on my agenda. Sorry, Dawn. You bring up families. We hosted this year 2 sessions that we've never done before, and it came from requests from individuals and families. But we hosted 2 sessions on the self-waiver. There were only 4 people enrolled in the self-waiver, individuals or their families. And we learned a lot through those sessions. And one of the things that we learned is that we are not very good at explaining to individuals or families, what does it mean when we enroll you on a waiver? What does that mean to you? And we do it every day. So I think we make the mistake of not taking the time to stop and help someone understand what that means. What is the responsibility on the individual? What is the responsibility on us? What will we do? There are a lot of things we have to follow, obviously. So that's another thing we're working on for next year, is drafting some, in some really easy to understand language, some materials that we can give out when we enroll someone on a waiver, or if someone's already on it and having trouble understanding. Like, what does it mean? What does it mean to be on a waiver? What does that really mean? And what are the responsibilities of the person on the waiver? And what can you expect from the county board? What is our role? What will we be doing? So, something else to look forward to for 19. Nancy, anything else about services that I didn't cover? No? Okay. Does anybody have questions about anything going on I could try to help answer? All right, then thank you.
Okay, before Jenny comes up for, I just want to add something about family support, Mark, since you brought it up. We are in the process of developing a lot, when we hear families say something that they're confused about or they want to have more discussion about, part of our work is really family engagement. So we're, a good example is, hosting those self-waiver sessions. So we were hearing concerns, getting the people in the room that need to hear about that and understand it. Also creating one-page documents, really accessible documents for families so that they can pick it up and say, oh yeah, this is what a waiver means, or these are my housing options. We have a lot of families who are trying to tease out, what am I going to do? Should I make my home an LLC? Or should I leave my home to my child? What does an apartment look like? What are those variety of options when they're planning for the future? So we're trying to develop a lot of tools online. You'll see next year there'll be a decision tool that will help families navigate those questions if they're thinking about future. What's going to happen with my loved one and how to make responsible choices within that family context. So you'll see a lot more of that too. We're also going to be enhancing the family portion of our page, our website, so that we have those, that neatly, easy for families to navigate. So thanks for bringing that up. And Jenny's going to talk about MUI.
I'm Jenny Flowers, for those of you who want to put a face with a name. I know we talk a lot on the phone and those kinds of things, but just quickly wanted to touch base about new rule that's coming out in January, right? New MUI rule. Again, I encourage you to go read it for yourself. I'm not going to read it to you. I did go through literally line by line, so if anybody's interested in what has changed from old rule to new rule, I can definitely share that with you. But some things that, again, these are not all inclusive, but some things that I thought that were important for you to be aware of. There's lots of revisions, lot of word changes and things like that through the rule that likely may impact how some interpret the rule. But I think personally in Hamilton County, for the most part, we're already interpreting it the way that it's going, the language is changing, so we should be okay. Some of the things, they've added some definitions, words that, titles and things of that nature that were not in there before. We now have a definition for a common law employee. They did slightly revise the MUI definition. Again, they took out some things that, they took out the adversely affected and the risk of harm. So they've really kind of, changed that up a little bit. They also refer back to several statutes, or several items within the rule, which is kind of interesting that they're doing that. But again, all in all, same basic concept. They took out, if the person is receiving services or likely to be receiving services. So, it's kind of like a given, right? So they tried to clean some of that up. The one thing that they did change is neglect. It's one of our favorites, right? So it kept the duty part in there, but they changed up, instead of it saying treatment, care, goods, supervision, or services, they changed that up to they made it more specific. So medical care, personal care, or other support that consequently results in a serious injury, right? I think that's going to be huge. Again, I think we're already interpreting it that way, but then they define serious injury as an injury that results in treatment by a physician, physician assistant, or nurse practitioner. So, having said that, again, I think that's how we, Hamilton County, are interpreting neglect. But they then came up with this new program implementation incident. So when, a lot of times when, MUIs don't rise to the level of, neglect allegations don't rise to the level of MUIs, we've always called them UIs, right? But it seems kind of strange to call neglect a UI. So this program implementation incident will kind of cover that. So it's when it's kind of the failure to carry out the individual specific plan, but there's minimal or no risk. So it's those situations where staff may have a lapse in judgment and they take the garbage out, right? The person has no alone time, they take the garbage out. Technically, they've kind of broke that level of supervision, but we have always looked at risk in Hamilton County. So we're not filing those now. So we're not going to file them in the future. So it should, again, we're not going to see a whole lot, but hopefully it'll help for people that are in other counties, see more of a consistency across the board in what we are filing and not filing. A couple other things that may just impact us a little bit. They revised the definition for medical emergency. IVs for dehydration are no longer going to be medical emergencies. So, that's good. If you remember, we've gone from all IVs were medical emergencies to dehydration. Now that's completely gone. They have changed. I encourage you to take a look at peer-to-peer. It used to be old language protocols, right? Category A. They have moved that to Category B. So probably not going to change a whole lot in terms of what we do. It's just, there's some different criteria for Category Bs than there are for Category As. They did take out the wording in peer-to-peer for minor injuries. I think that'll be in the interpretive guidelines. They took out the wording for minor injuries and they added biting, which breaks the skin. So that's kind of a more specific term. Typically, we were filing those, but there are some situations where, we may not have. So that's going to be an automatic MUI. They also added, if there's a peer-to-peer incident, and this just happened. There's a peer-to-peer incident, and it doesn't rise to the level of a MUI peer-to-peer. There's no injury. There's nothing like that. But the person, the victim, if you will, the acted upon person decides to press charges. They have now said that needs to be a peer-to-peer incident. So we've filed it as a law enforcement, right, because the person pressed charges, but we didn't necessarily file it as a peer-to-peer, and now they're saying that will be peer-to-peer. The other things, just quickly, for Category C cases, remember those are law enforcement unscheduled hospitalization, which will now be unanticipated hospitalization. And then unapproved behavior support will now be unapproved behavioral support. But they did add tasing, if a person is tased, to law enforcement. Remember, it just used to be charged, incarcerated, arrested. So now if they're tased, it's an MUI. We've been filing those already, but just kind of keep that in mind. They've added a definition for physical harm. They added team. They defined team finally, right? So that's interesting. And then they also revised the UI definition slightly to include urgent care treatment centers and the program implementation incidents, right? So those ones that kind of were the neglect UIs. So they revised the UI to do that. They removed the definition for support broker, which I thought was interesting because later on in rule they talk about the support broker. So I don't know if they just forgot to take it out there too or not, but it is, they removed that definition. Under general administrative investigation, I just want to kind of make you aware that they've added that on the part of the DD services, the IA, that we will, except when law enforcement or children's services are running the investigation, we will make every effort to come to a preliminary finding in 14 days and inform the provider and the family kind of what that preliminary disposition might be. Again, we know that's not always possible or feasible. Hopefully we're trying to do that now, trying to keep people out of work at the least amount of time. And that's specifically for physical abuse and sexual abuse. I'm not sure why, just those two. We try to do that for all, neglect, physical, verbal, all of those types of things. I will say under, very important for providers, under review, prevention, and closure of MUIs. So they've always said that provider needs to have a written procedure for your internal review of MUIs. They have now added that written procedure must specify that senior management of the agency provider will be informed within 2 working days following the day staff become aware of a potential or determined MUI involving misappropriation, neglect, physical abuse, or sexual abuse. So need to, go back and look at your policy procedure to make sure that that is in there. And they've also added, and this is something that we've encouraged, but they also added specifically that the individuals' teams will ensure that risks associated with MUIs are addressed in the individual plan or the ISP, right? So that annual review of incidents to make sure that they're addressed in the individual plan is now officially in there. Anybody who knows me knows that my favorite part of rule is that there's no more semi-annual reviews, so I only have to do numbers once a year now. Requirements for UIs, they did, just briefly, requirements for UIs, they added that the log shall contain only UIs defined in, and it refers back to a specific section of the rule. So just take a look at that for those of you that have to do, the UI logs. And then the other thing that I just wanted to touch base, and everybody has been super cooperative, we haven't run into an issue with it, but access to records. Typically, we do not ask you to give out a staff person's social security number or anything like that. If they go to registry or for a registry hearing, we are required to then ask you for that social security number. So the rule now says you're allowed to give it to us, essentially. Anytime there is a PPI, a primary person involved in one of those more serious things, we do ask for their birth date. And that's really helpful for trying to narrow down, who that person is so that we're not confusing them with other folks. So again, birth dates you can give us at any time, but we will ask for social security numbers if they're going to go on the registry. And unrelated to rule, but on that topic of PPIs, I just wanted to also quickly remind you or encourage you that when you're hiring someone new, again, I know you're doing BCIs and I know you're doing the wrap-backs, but try to do that quick search in Clerk of Courts. We just had another one fall through the cracks where they were involved in an incident. We happened to look on Clerk of Courts because that's what we do, and found out that they have a disqualifying offense that they did not report to their agency. Mm-hmm. So it's frustrating. I get it. I don't know how to fix it. So the breakdown is that if a person is not physically arrested and taken to the station and fingerprinted, and they're just like cited or ticketed, when they go to court, they're not fingerprinted. So the fingerprints are not always then reaching the state level to be included in the BCI. So again, everybody has a clause in their, application process that, have you been convicted of any of these? And typically they check no, and if you are, you need to inform us, but we know that doesn't always happen. So just again, if you do that real quick, Clerk of Courts, they've made it easier now. Where you can actually put the individual's birth date in there. So if you've got a John Smith, you don't have to go through, 57 pages of John Smiths. You can narrow it down by birth date. So it's helpful to do that. And again, if we find out anything, we'll always give you a call too. So, and then just quickly back to MUI rule, I'm gonna try to put together a couple of trainings in December, just so we'll send something out, just if you're interested in kind of going through the rule more line by line, what is changing and how that's going to impact us. But again, all in all, I think that we should pretty much be on the same page in Hamilton. So, questions? Great.
We're all so driven by rule and policy and procedure. So today I was thinking about, how serious that is and intense it is, right? And sometimes we get overwhelmed with it. So I'm in traffic and I'm stuck, and just about 100 yards away from me, Marty, is the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile.
I love it when you
And I
say
thought,
that.
what must their policies and procedures look like, right? Can you imagine having to write that for the Wienermobile? So we'll park in this space. So anyway, quite a different job.
You didn't just start singing? That's what I did.
It kind of got in my head. And then, of course, in one last election result was that coffee is, the incumbent coffee has overcome tea. Mountain Dew and Spark is the drink of needy professionals for the rest of us. So I said we all live on Rolaids, ibuprofen, and coffee. That's our key to success, right? So, okay, a couple things. Just a reminder. This time, last year, at this time, one of the things we really talked about, asked a question, and now that question emerged. Providers saying, obviously we've been talking about staffing crisis and those for forever. And I asked the question, if we took a random 100 staff out of anywhere in Ohio, right, just DSPs, anywhere, we just pulled, 100 staff out, and I asked you as providers, how many of those staff, if we pulled any 100 from any provider in Ohio, would still be in the same position in the same agency for more than a year? And essentially, what did you say? What do you think that is now? Give me a percentage. Just throw it out. I heard 90%, 30%. Yeah, that's what it was last year. 20 to 30% is what you said, right? I mean, that's amazing, right? Like when we said in the same 1 year, same position, right? When we all know, would we say that is a kind of a way to look at it? Yet the people that we serve stay, for the most part, forever, right? So think about that, the way it's kind of like this, right? So we said, okay, well, let's go a step further, because a lot of the energy that we're talking about toward integration, right? And that we should be doing integration now. We said, okay, well, how many out of the, let's say the 25% of people left really have a good understanding of how to implement integration? Well, first I said just understand it, and you said 10%. And I said, how many out of that 10% then would be able to really implement integration, really have an understanding where they could go out as DSPs? And you said 2 to 3 out of every 100, right? That's what we said together. And we said, so how do we do that, right? Like that's undoable, okay? So what we did together which is what makes Hamilton County, I think, a little different, is we said, let's do something together. Let's start a conversation where we begin to engage our partners at DODD, and this is before our good partner back here, Keith, was involved. Let's begin to formulate as providers a way to engage the department and ask them down, and ask for what is it that we need? What do we need to be able to pull off integration? Because we know a large part of the problem, but we don't necessarily have the answers, but it's something we have to do together, okay? And I think this is really, really important to frame the rest of this year and next year, and that is this. The department and the county board are in a weird position for this reason. We are both compliance officer on one side, right? There's rules, and MEI, those kinds of things. We have to make sure we're doing the thing. On the other side, we want people to be successful. There is no business if there aren't providers. There are no, right? So we want to be a good partner and do as much upfront so that you don't hit those compliance issues, right? And so you don't have these cataclysmic kinds of issues like staffing issues and that. So we have to be a good partner, one, two. So what we said to you was, let's really think about what's the ask that we need to the department. What do we need to ask the department for help? What do we need to ask us, the county board, for help? Because we have a role in this, right? And so we began that process. So I asked that in January that you kind of choose 6 volunteers from amongst your ranks and as delegates. And what we would begin to look, and we did an open-ended, what is it that we know about integration? What is our commitment to it, which was excellent. We're committed to it. What is our, how might that look? And then what does that leave in terms of the support that we need? What is the support we need to pull that off? And we didn't know that at that point. We're just beginning that work, right? And the idea is we'd invite John Martin or his best representative to come meet with us so we can say, here's what we really need to make this happen. We're committed, and we're doing it, and we wanted to show our success, and we did that. Together, the delegates we chose, here are the things we're good at. We could show some success stories. We made some videos, those kinds of things. Meanwhile, the department was thinking the same thing, and so just the easy version of it, they gave us Keith is a liaison to us to say, hey, we want to engage with you, right? So that was a very good thing. What happened from that point, very important to our next conversation, is is that residentially, it was a little easier for us to figure out what our question was and how we do, what our successes were. Day program wise, it was not, for two reasons. One is we didn't have enough day provider delegates. That just kind of was when we picked as you picked your delegates, we didn't have enough. So one of the one day provider delegate, in a very humble mood, said, you know, I don't speak for every day provider. Can there be more of us? So we began. So we were a little bit behind in that, right? So we got to summer, and our residential folks said, okay, we kind of know what our ask is. And I will just out that. What the ask was, what we did, we were able to show successes, those kind of things. Residential providers came to what they really believed, what you believed was in your best interest to engage the department with, was an idea that maybe what we could do would be to create a service code, not a position, but a service code that will allow some flexibility so that if you have DSPs, your direct service staff, that really excel at integration, there might be a little bit of a higher rate that you would pay, or it might even be a program manager that could do that work. Because what we agreed was that all DSPs are not necessarily, they might be fantastic caregivers, but they may not really have a good handle on integration stuff, right? So that kind of was the thinking behind residential, and I'll talk about the status of that in a minute. ADA, we were just behind. We just needed more time because, quite frankly, to make it really easy, it's just more confusing. Here's what day providers tell me you know, is that you're struggling with the expense to be able to do both, to handle the expense and do what we would call true integration in the community, where you have a low enough number of people that you can do true integration. What I mean by that is this: if this number is not necessarily correct. Some of my day providers have helped me figure this out. We started with the premise at that time that, you know, the best that any day provider could do was a 1-to-4 ratio in order to be able to afford integration on the community. Some of my partners have helped me. That isn't even necessarily true. And the idea is, let me just take it easy. So if I just took these 4 good people here, and I'll go great. Is great better? Yes. Okay, these 4 great people here, right? And say, I'm uplifting, sir. That's what we're doing here today. Right? All right. So I take the 4 people and I take you out. The way it works out when you really think about integration, right? You have to do individual discovery if it's really going to work, right? So it could be a great activity if I go out with 4 people. It can be inclusive, right? But it's hard to call that good integration because, quite frankly, the way it works out, really, for the most part, as we talked about it, was, hey, today is Wednesday. You kind of get to pick your activity, and we're hoping you guys kind of like that activity. Does that make sense? You know, we kind of hope I want to go to the fish store today and really look at fish. Are you in the fish? Well, I kind of like them, you know. But, you know, like enough, I'd rather do that than something else. But it's really, so, you know, and those are things we're working on. This is art, it's not science. It's not science, okay? So, but the point is we began to look at that. Largely that ratio also depends on the needs of these people, right? Their ability to express, their ability to handle everything that happens in the community, and all that stuff, plus whatever else is going on back home. And by back home, I mean within the day program itself, right? So there are a lot of challenges. It's complex, and we don't have it figured out yet. So some of your good partners have suggested to me that rather than us just put a model out of our own and say, here's what we're asking, is that we ask the department, we begin to engage the department, and Keith and I will talk about this more together in a conversation about, does the state now, with all that's going on, have a model that they could, or at least a suggested model that they could show us that we could respond to? Does that make sense? Because we may ask and be completely off the mark. I think what our job as day providers is to say, let us show you very clearly what our challenges are. Not a complaint, not complaints, and they're not all the same, but just to say, at our street level, this is what it looks like, right? Which means we have to be a little vulnerable. It is a little bit scary because we're not sure how people are going to react, right? But this is what it looks like, and these are our actual costs. But in order to do that, again, what some of our partners suggest, let's ask the department, what does the mark look like? That's what I'm hearing from you. What does the mark really look like? And if it's ambiguous, then we all need to really, really work that out and continue that discussion till we get to something that looks like, okay, we can respond to that. Right now, a lot of your peers and me, as I heard you say, we feel like we're so far away from the mark, and it's so different that I don't know that we can come up with a good ask. It seems like a lot of work on our part if we don't even know, where the green is, so to speak, right? Okay. Does that make sense to you? Okay. So it's confusing, and then the unfortunate part of this, obviously, is that we're looking at a new director, right? So then we have to spin, right? I hate dead time or downtime, right? So here's what I'm going to ask, as I think we just don't wait until a new director. What I'd like us to do, I will certainly talk with Keith a little bit about that. How might we do that, just as we look forward, right? And so that we can give better direction there. But at the same time, I really do think it's absolutely critical that each of you, day providers, start to really put together what do our challenges look like, right? Because so many times, let me give you an example. This will sound like it's way off, but I think it helps you. When I was in MUI, one of the things that we all struggled with, all of us, was the peer-to-peer rule. Because the threshold was so low that if one individual pushed another individual with no physical harm, but pushed them with enough force, we were having to call police and all that stuff. So you were very upset, we were upset, police were upset, okay? It wasn't a very good rule. It just wasn't, right? Because we went back to the state and we said, and this is a street view versus a, kind of a removed position view, right? We said, look, we cannot file that many peer-to-peers. It's our police are angry at us, our communities aren't happy, parents are blah, blah, blah. In fairness to the department, they said, listen, we have too many of these, and they're pretty serious. And we said, well, show us the percent of all the people that have peer-to-peers, how many have actually been hurt? And do you know what it was? Throw out a percentage. 2 or 3. Okay, now here's what's really important, because it's always easy to finger point and blame, right? You cannot legislate that kind of a rule with 2 to 3% of the people being hurt, right? So it seemed incredible, and we were all kind of sanctimonious about this. But then I thought about this for a minute. If you're at the department for the whole state, 2 to 3's a lot of people. Does that make sense? 2 to 3% is a lot of people. So when you're in that position, you're counting bodies of people that were really hurt. That's a lot. So you emotionally give a darn, right? It's the same thing here. Is we've got to engage in a way that we're able to show our allies at the department, this is what it really looks like. They are incredible barriers in a way that they see it clearly from our view, and we have to understand from the department's view is still there's a mandate that we proceed, right? Does that make sense? So I just want kind of by a show of hands, if I can, how many people would support our way forward when we begin to engage the department with, we would like to talk about a proposed model from the department, or kind of a better target, so to speak, of what day program looks like, with the opportunity that we can also very clearly show what our challenges are. And let me say this for all of our providers, they don't have to be the exact same challenges. Do you see what I'm saying? I think what we thought was when we started this was that our challenges pretty much look the same. And what we're finding, it's just not. It's just not. So I think this won't happen in a week, right? But how many people are for that kind of a engagement with the department? Okay. All right. Anybody opposed? Okay. All right. So we'll proceed with that, and I'll continue to engage and keep people updated. Okay. Thank you for that. Another thing, putting our money where our mouth is, okay, is we also believe as county board that, we can't say, oh, we're sorry that you have problems with DSPs, not, a shortage of DSPs and all that. Boy, sorry about your luck. That's really tough, right? That's ridiculous, right? And we won't. So we thought, how can we help? And one of the things that we know that all of our DSPs are faced with is, On a national level, and there's a lot of great data, on a national level, 50% of all direct care staff across all fields, okay, live under the poverty line. 50%. Now, what people fail to say is this, right? Okay, so, and I grew up working class, just on the other side of that, right? So I know this. If you've been in a position, well, then how many people are just above that line? Right? It's staggering, right? And so what we thought we could do, and we have, you remember last time, we offered as a county board that we would dedicate a person on my team in a position at the department who would offer, we would take all of our gold standard members and the next 10 providers that volunteer for this, and what we would do is do what we call resource allies, so that any of your DSPs could call us or email us, okay, and say, I'm struggling with food, clothing, shelter, childcare, and a reasonable car or service pricing, right? Mechanic. I need a mechanic, right? Or some kind of transportation, right? Those are the basics. I just call those the Maslow's, right? Those are the basics, because if you're beset with those issues, right, it's really difficult to show up for work. It just is, right? So, and so here's what we know. So we started that in September, and it's just a pilot. We looked to expand it if it works, and we've had 15 people. We've had more calls than this, but we've had 15 DSPs call us from different agencies. Actually, a couple were program managers for a pretty big program. Call us and say, really need help. Housing has been one of the biggest. Okay, here's kind of the outcome so far. Okay, food has not been as much of an issue. Food for our kids, for those folks' kids, has been. Clothing for their kids has been a big issue. Housing has been the biggest issue so far. Folks not being able to afford housing. One of the DSPs only had $200, period. That's all she had in her whole bank account, for various reasons, right? So these have been, we've had a one child care thing that we tried to help out. Transportation has been an issue for 3 of those people. So we're going to continue to do this. We're going to expand this as well. Okay, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But I think the other thing that's very helpful to understand is within your own agencies, and you can see this. There are things that I feel like as you look at these folks, you as an employer, me as an employer can help, but you're so vulnerable to ask that of your employer. It's really hard to come to your employer and bear your life out and say, this is my life and I'm really struggling here, right? So that's one issue. And the other issue is we've spent quite a bit of time trying to help some of the folks that call us because they struggle as much to organize, to have the time and the ability to organize their life so they can take care of business. And that's no judgment. I'm not judging, I'm saying one of the things that's emerging is just the ability for some of those life skills to say, hey, I know this is difficult. Let's prioritize your emergencies, your crises. Let's prioritize those things. Here's a way we can come at this. Now, what we're doing on our side, we're not just saying, hey, you need clothing at we heard there's a place down the street called Michael's Church. We're not doing it. We're making sure we're engaging with the people that we refer them to so that we can say, call the food pantry, but listen, when you call, talk to Chris. If Chris doesn't answer the phone, don't talk to anybody yet. We all know this as social workers, right? I'm serious. This is what we're doing, right? We're not just, because to give people a cold number when they're already overwhelmed is ridiculous, right? So, and this has met with a lot of success. We've had a lot of help from our community partners. I'll give you an example. Shout out to Gabriel's Place. Man, they have set 3 people. We've had 3 people in need, and they've given clothing. Their answer is yes, send them. We'll help them out, And then we try to do our part as a good partner too to help those partners out ourselves. We try to do some things to help them. So if you're interested in that, if that's something that is important to you, okay, please, we will get that flyer out to everybody, okay? There's not enough people. Now, we're not overwhelmed is what I'm saying, right? So I think at this point, even though it's a pilot, we can, and what we'll say, if we begin to get overwhelmed, we'll probably call you a little bit and figure out what's our next step, okay? All right, any questions about that? All right, thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks to all of you for being here today, and for people who are online. We'll see the numbers there. I just wanted to ask if you have the opportunity, we're trying to get feedback on how our website is and our communications are. So if you get, Lisa, where do you go? Just to our main website?
Yeah, it'll be on our website later.
Okay, so later today? Okay, so later today, there'll be a survey post, really brief survey to give us feedback on how we're doing with communication. So if you get a chance, we'd love to have the provider perspective on that. And the other thing I want to note is our next meeting is in January, but it's not the first
January
Wednesday
9th.
because it's going to be January 9th. So just make sure you get that on your calendar and don't show up on January 3rd here. All right, all right, take care, everybody. Thanks. Yeah.
Oh, I guess you didn't make it. Let's see. Provider forum. 11A.
Yeah, they did every one of them.
Wow, that was fast. I missed it. I was early.